In the 4th century, Eusebius provides a detailed list of the early church bishops in Antioch, Rome, Alexandria, Athens, Corinth, Smyrna, and others. These lists show a direct continuation from the apostles like Andrew, consecrating the father of the heretic Marcion, Philologus, the first bishop of Sinop, as well as Andrew consecrating the first bishop of Corinth, named Apollos, who is mentioned in Paul's letters, and Mark being the first bishop of Alexandria, consecrated by Peter, with Peter being the first bishop of both Antioch and Rome, consecrating both Linus and Evodius. And of course, they list James as the leader and first bishop of the Church of Jerusalem. And from them are the 70 apostles listed in Acts, and names that look familiar to people mentioned in Paul's letters. These elaborate lists of succession show what appears to be a united church that has a direct line of orthodoxy from Jesus down to Constantine. However, the primary sources show this not only to be problematic, but impossible in some cases. Many of the sources have conflicting lists with each other. People considered to be alive in certain times are somehow alive in times when they should be dead. And the surviving texts that we do have are so few and far between that it becomes a nightmare to try to piece it all together. The truth is, early Christianity was far from united. It was so diverse that I would argue Christians in the first 2 centuries were farther apart than a Mormon is today with a Catholic. On one side of the spectrum, you have Ebionites, Jewish law-observing Christians who revere James the Just, but reject Paul as a liar. They follow strict dietary laws from the Torah, keep the Sabbath and the commandments, and think Jesus is the Messiah, but not God. You also have Celcus from Parthia, who are also Torah observant, but also think that Jesus was a giant 96-mile tall and 14-mile wide angel who was the Son of God, and his sister, the Holy Spirit, was also the same size. And no, I'm not making this up. On the other side of the spectrum, you have quite the opposite. Cainites, who think the Old Testament God is actually the devil, and Judas was the hero, and all the way to pagan Christians like the Perete, who believed that Greek gods such as Zeus and Aphrodite were actually the archons who created the world, and Christ came to save the world from them. There are many sects and denominations in between, such as the school of Callistus, who gave way to the Noetians, people who were called heretics at first for saying Jesus Christ and God the Father were actually the same being, as well as Docetists, who think Christ was so divine that he could not have a flesh body, and that he was just a phantom that just appeared to be human. Docetists were the first main heresy of Christianity on record. And then there are some sects that are so radical that you don't even know where to put them on the spectrum. The Borborites, who are rumored to be one and the same as the Nicolaitans mentioned in Revelation, are a group of Eastern Roman Christians of Syria and Egypt who apparently put semen and menstrual fluids in their Eucharist and engaged in orgiastic baptismal rites, took psychedelics, spoke in tongues. Those guys definitely had the Holy Spirit. There was no such thing as proto-Orthodox. This is a term used in hindsight of what ideas won the battle for what would fit best for the Roman Church in the 4th century. Who we are told are the heretics and who we are told are orthodoxy is not so clear when we examine the sources and compare them to the central teachings of Jesus and even Paul too. I will be demonstrating this in this video. As most people know, Jesus lived in the first half of the 1st century, had a following of young Jewish teens consisting of both male and female, and he was crucified under Pontius Pilate in Jerusalem around 30 AD. Most of his life is shrouded in mystery. He wrote nothing down, and we have zero contemporary primary sources or any archaeological evidence about him or his movement that exists from the period in which he was alive. Everything we know about him is taken from Paul's letters and what the gospel authors say about him. All we know about his family is that his mother's name was Mary, and that James may or may not have been his brother. Paul tells us nothing about his father, and the earliest gospel, Mark, doesn't even mention who his father's name is. It is not until Matthew's gospel, written between 85 and 95, in which we get any mention of Joseph being the father of Jesus. Celsus, a Greek who was hostile to Christianity, claims that Jesus' biological father was a Roman soldier named Pantera. Celsus cites Jewish sources who he says he got this information from, and the Talmudic fragments from Rabbinic sources also agree with this. According to Origen, Celsus lived during the reign of Hadrian between 117 and 138. Even if Celsus wrote later, this would mean that Pantera and Joseph, as possible fathers of Jesus, are nearly contemporary ideas to each other in the sources. If Joseph was really Jesus' father's name, you would think Paul's letters in Mark's early gospel would easily relate this. And what reason would Jews have for deceptively telling Celsus in the early 2nd century that his father was actually Pantera, a Gentile Roman, born out of wedlock? It seems that there would be much more incentive for Paul to hide this than there would be for Celsus to lie about this. Whether Joseph or Pantera is his father is impossible to know. I will leave that up to you to decide. This is a topic for another video. The main question I want to explore in this video is, what did the earliest Christians believe, and who were they? Celsus gives us a list of the sects and denominations of the church that were relevant in his day, in the early 2nd century. He says, "Those of the great church receive as true the accounts of the creation in 6 days, and God resting on the 7th. They agree in regard to this first man, and deduce their genealogies from him. They accept the narratives about going of the children of Israel into Egypt, and their flight from it. I know some hold the Creator, the God of the Jews, to be different from and opposed to the God which Jesus came from. In truth, their divisions are endless. They have carnal and spiritual men. They call themselves Christians, who wish to live in all things as the Jews. There are among them Sibylists, Simonians, Marcellians, Carpocratians, disciples of Mary and Martha, and Marcionites. But notwithstanding all their divisions and abusive controversies, you may hear them all saying, 'The world is crucified unto me, and I unto the world.'" What I find so interesting about this passage is how he shows no knowledge of any Gnostic heresy at this time. Although he does show knowledge of divisions, which is understandable, he considers the Simonians, Marcellians, Carpocratians, and Marcionites to be among the sects of the great church. All of them are considered Gnostics and heretics by later Christian writers. You would think Celsus would have said something about this if he knew this was the case, and he mentions them as being Sibyllist. I think this is very telling of how the early church was divided, but yet all were within the church, wide-ranging doctrines that opposed each other, yet all believed in the crucifixion. I will address every single sect listed by Celsus, plus others, and I think there is a good reason why Celsus lists the Sibyllist first.